Hello, vocab. Week 4. Period. Here we go. Here's the vocab words for week 4, 10 on our students. Let's do this. First, we have apathetic. It's an adjective. You'd use it to describe someone or their actions. Now, this someone or their actions is described as apathetic when they seem to not care and they put forth pretty much zero effort as a result. Now, this would be a pretty strong insult to say to someone, but if someone doesn't care, if they're apathetic, then they won't really care that much that you just insulted them. Whatever, man. The noun form is apathy. Someone with apathy just doesn't care, and they're not going to try. And on the bottom here, this one guy says, oh gosh, now the print's so small I can't see it. Troop, what's with you? Is it that you, oh man, that you can't or you won't? And he says, I don't know and I don't care. That's pretty apathetic. It's a pretty apathetic attitude, which usually, that's not how soldiers are. They tend to be very devoted people. So this comic, though, that guy's like a modern Beetle Bailey. Oh man, no one's going to get that reference. All right. Cartographer. Cartographer, this is a noun. It's actually a job. It's a thing a person would be. A cartographer is someone whose job is to make maps. They design them and have to figure out how to make something which is enormous and wildly complicated and nuanced, like, the Earth, into something compressed and flat and small and still somehow accurate. This is a weirdly controversial job, being a cartographer. We may talk about it in class a little bit, but it's a subject I'm very much interested in. It's impossible to make an accurate representation of the Earth. To make it flat, you have to make all kinds of decisions that drastically change our perception of things. The Earth that we tend to think about is the Mercator projection. The Mercator projection is it's riddled with problems. Pretty much the only thing it's good for is what it was designed for, which is to help sailors cross the ocean. But we don't really do a lot of sailing across the ocean these days. And the Mercator is really inaccurate and has led to a lot of mistaken conclusions as a result. But we'll get into that another time. Now, the field of map making is called cartography. That's the job of it. So, a conformist. Conformist, this is a noun. Conformist is someone who strictly follows expectations and patterns of behavior. Someone who always does the right thing, never gets out of line. They're the square peg in the square hole, right? But here's the thing. You very rarely hear someone say conformist. We almost always use the opposite. We say nonconformist. Because a conformist is kind of what people are by and large. A nonconformist is someone who's a bit rebellious and refuses to do things like everyone else does. It's a little bit rebellious. It's someone who goes their own way. So being a rebel is really cool. Being a nonconformist usually just makes someone sound difficult to work with and kind of obnoxious. And on the bottom here is a picture of Marlon Brando in his first major movie. It's called The Wild Ones. It's from the early 50s. It's great. I highly recommend it. In it, he plays the leader of a motorcycle gang who left a different motorcycle gang called the Beatles. His name is Johnny in the movie. And so Johnny and his new motorcycle gang roll up into the small town. The other motorcycle gang rolls up too. And in the small town, they kind of take it over, and the people are all real alarmed. And this young girl, who's going to end up being the love interest in the movie, she walks up to Johnny and she says, "What are you rebelling against?" Which is a pretty good question. And Johnny says, "What do you got?" Oh, Brando, he was so cool. He was so awesome. And then he became, well, a nonconformist and very difficult to work with. He went from rebel to nonconformist, which is less cool. Existential. All right, this is a tough one. Existential is an adjective, all right? It describes something that's existential concerns the self and one's own existence, which may seem pretty apparent. I mean, you look at the word, you can see existence basically in there. But to be existential, to have an existential crisis or an existential level of anxiety goes deeper than that. It implies a soul-level wondering about whether or not you exist, what your place is in the universe, and whether you matter at all. I think the teenage years are full of existential crises, to be honest. You have them provoked rather easily. Usually people who are having an existential crisis, it's after a very major occasion. Now, while they are unpleasant to go through, they can lead to really wonderful realizations and ideas. I think having an existential moment is not a bad thing necessarily, although it's come to kind of sound like that in society. Now, there's a whole school of philosophy and literature and thought named for this. You can talk about existentialism or existentialist literature, but we'll get into that another time. Nefarious. Nefarious is an adjective. It's used to label and describe an action or an activity that's wicked, immoral, or ugly. Something that's bad and has bad motives behind it. He had a nefarious grin. Ooh, that's not good. If he has a nefarious grin, he's up to no good. his attempts to rig the student election for class president was full of nefarious actions like stealing the ballot box and tearing down posters or whatever. Wait a second, that mustache looks familiar. Do I know anyone with that mustache? I feel like the other people I've seen with that mustache are good and like decent and reasonable and wholesome and not nefarious at all. Why would a villain have a mustache like that? Usually that's what amazing English teachers have. All right, there he is again. To vilify. To vilify someone, now it could be something, but it's pretty much always against a person. It's to speak of them in such a way that it is damaging to their reputation. You can think about it as trying to make that person seem like a villain. Vilify, villain, makes sense. Now, usually if you're trying to vilify someone, it's seen as a little bit of a cheap shot and a little bit unfair. All right, it's to spread negative information about someone in an effort to make them look bad or more villainous. All right. I don't know what this website is. I liked the illustration of this, but wordpandit.com looks vaguely, it's pretty culturally insensitive, this logo here. So I tried to crop it out. It looks like I didn't really succeed at it. Ignore that. The definition is pretty good. I'm not sure about that logo. That logo seems insensitive at best. Vindicate. A lot of V's this week. To vindicate is a verb. It's to indicate that someone or something, to vindicate someone is to take that someone or something and to rescue its reputation and prove that it's actually good. If someone's been accused of something bad and then they prove themselves or you prove them to be innocent and good, they have been vindicated. All right? Sometimes they'll say that someone is vindicated after they're found not guilty in court. That's not exactly the same thing, to be found not guilty and be vindicated, but people use that example a lot. Now, someone can feel vindicated when they're proven right when everyone else thought that they were wrong. If someone has a suggestion in class and they're like, oh, well, in the story it says blah, 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 and everyone goes, no, it doesn't, you're misremembering. And then they go back and they check their notes, and that's exactly what it says. They have been vindicated. Everyone said I was wrong, but I am right. That's to be vindicated. A zealot. Zealots this is a noun. The activity of it would be called zealotry. A zealot is the person, okay? A zealot is someone who is absolutely blindly devoted to a particular belief system. It's usually used in a religious context, but not always, and it doesn't have to be. Now, being a zealot is not regarded as a good thing, because a zealot will ignore any thought or reasoning that doesn't align with their previously held notions, and will act in a way that may be harmful to themselves as a result, and harmful to others. Zealotry is absolute devotion to a belief system without any regard for anything else. When we talk about religious wars, these are held by zealots, right? This illustration here is from the Apple 10 iPhone event, the iPhone 10. I feel like that's actually a pretty good example of zealotry. Apple fans, and I'll include myself in this, I use a lot of Apple products, are really being taken advantage of. The advancements Apple makes are pretty lame these days and not very significant, or they're actually not very helpful. This face recognition thing makes me nervous. But people, I guarantee, are going to line up and sleep outside of the stores to get one of the first ones. They are zealots for the Apple cause. Even when Apple's ripping them off and they can't quite tell what to really make of it, they still will do anything because it has that little bitten Apple insignia on it. I feel like I'm stuck with Apple because now I have everything else Apple, and well, how am I going to get out of it? Anyway, transcendent. This is an adjective. Something that's transcendent is an experience or an idea that takes one far beyond the normal boundaries of their experience. They transcend the regular levels of experience. They go beyond it. Now, transcendent experience makes you reconsider your prior experiences and all your future ones. So it would be something like, say, a meal. This picture here is from a piece of molecular gastronomy, which, while it's out of fashion now, I'm actually really into this stuff. I think it's very interesting. The idea would be you reinvent how you cook and how you present food. So there was a restaurant in Chicago called WD-50 where Wiley Dufresne, the chef, was doing things like he'd bring out a balloon that was made out of something edible, and when you popped the balloon, you could eat it, but it was filled with a scent. And the scent was part of the meal. So you'd smell it, and that was your course for the meal, and then you'd eat the little balloon. Or he had things like, he'd have a piece of bacon suspended on a golden thread over a bit of toffee, and you couldn't use your hands, you had to lean forward and eat it. And while that stuff may sound pretty silly, it's reinventing the idea of eating and making it into an art form, which is a transcendent experience, if you're into it. You can see a work of art. When I saw the Elgin marbles, it was a transcendent experience for me. I stood there and I cried because I didn't realize human beings were capable of making something so perfect. So hopefully you get to have transcendent moments in your life. People tend to be very open to them or not very open to them. I'm very open to them. I really like them. So yeah, have a transcendent meal. See a transcendent piece of art. Have an English teacher who redefines how you thought the subject could be taught. You know, maybe, well, I'm trying. I don't think I've ever reached transcendence, but, you know, I do try. Last, we have simpleton. This is probably more accurate to what I really teach like. A simpleton's not a very nice thing to call someone. It labels them as simple. Not simple as in uncomplicated, simple as in not smart. Very not smart. It can also be used to label someone foolish or gullible. If someone's like, well, I'm just a simpleton. Well, that's not a nice thing for them to say about themselves. It means they're easily fooled or suckered. All right? So, there you go. That's 10 words for this week. Some real good ones. I look forward to it. Let's use them this week. Except don't call people simpletons. Don't do that. That's not very nice. All right. Good luck. Godspeed. Something like that. Farewell.